The time is at hand.
From the crackhead capital of the world in Williamson, West Virginia, you are in Dark Places on the Nighthawk Radio Network. I'm your Huckleberry, Junebug Fugit. For some reason, deer have waged war against me for about the last month or so. We were coming home one night from getting groceries and nonsense like that, and I saw this one deer trying to climb over the concrete wall that divides the lanes, and about that time another deer was on her way to join that first deer and just ran right out in front of us. I had to slam on my brakes to keep from hitting it. And like a week later, we were coming down the road, same story, we just had got groceries and junk, and there was a deer just laying in the road like it was dead. And about the time I got up to it, it raised up and just started running around, zigzagging on the road. And I swerved off onto the shoulder to get away from it because I didn't know what it was going to do, because it was crazy. The thing was possessed. I got off on the shoulder and it still just charged at the car, and it hit the back bumper. Kind of knocked the bumper a little sideways. It's cockeyed looking now. And then, a few days after that, I was on my way to work, and a deer just jumped over the guardrail and darted right across the road in front of me. I missed it by like 6 inches. I used to like deer. I would feed them apples and stuff all the time, bring apples home from work and put out for the deer, and it was cute to watch them and everything. Now, they're not fun anymore. Back in 2008, a little bit before our house fire in 2009, I was on my way to work in my original Mustang. I have a different Mustang now. And there was a deer just standing right in the road, staring at all the traffic coming toward it. And I didn't really have anywhere to go because there was cars on both sides of me. I was kind of in the middle lane, and so was the deer. And I hit it, and its head went through the windshield, and then it proceeded to roll down the passenger side of my car. Ripped off the mirror, tore up the hood, the bumper, the door. Everything on that passenger side was just destroyed. And luckily at the time I had full coverage insurance, and I don't anymore. I should probably look into that. But at the time, the insurance company just paid for every bit of it. It was pretty cool. It did $8,000 worth of damage to that car. It's insane. But this is not a show about deer. I've got some ghost stories for you this week.
This is Mr. Haunted, your In Dark Places news correspondent, with a story out of Tempe, Arizona, called Zookeeper Barbie. Zookeeper Barbie arrested for backyard zoo that featured cats and hats and one random raccoon. In Tempe, Arizona, a 44-year-old woman was arrested for operating an unlicensed petting zoo after neighbors reported kids lining up outside her backyard. For a $5 admission, visitors could see exotic animals, which turned out to be a bearded dragon, 2 cats in a playpen, and a raccoon she claimed had wandered in but stuck around for the snacks. She had signs with animal facts, all copied from Wikipedia, and offered VIP tours that included a Capri Sun and a selfie with Reggie the Wonder Ferret. Authorities cited health violations and illegal animal exhibition. One official said, "It wasn't even a ferret. We think it was just a long hamster." And there you go for your In Dark Places news.
Thank you, Jimmy. Mexican cops slammed for fleeing ghost woman seen on the side of the road by Tim Banal. Thanks, Tim. A pair of Mexican police officers found their courage and professionalism questioned after they encountered a woman who appeared to be a ghost, and rather than investigate the situation, simply drove away from the scene in fright. The strange incident reportedly occurred last month in the Mexico City neighborhood of Xochimilco. Filmed by the officer in the passenger seat of the patrol car, the cops can be seen rolling up alongside a woman standing perfectly still beside the road with her hair draped over her face. When the mysterious stranger did not respond to their attempts to get her attention, the unsettled cops unleashed some uneasy laughter before leaving the woman in their proverbial dust. Following the eerie encounter, one of the officers foolishly posted the footage to social media, undoubtedly expecting people to be awestruck by their run-in with the chilling figure. While some viewers did express fear over the eerie stranger as the video spread online, a decidedly different reaction emerged as many observers slammed the cops for abandoning the woman, who was more likely a resident in distress rather than a spirit haunting the sidewalk. The cops' superiors have yet to respond to the matter, though one imagines that the pair received a stern lecture from their bosses about both the incident itself and the misguided decision to share the strange scene online. I've learned that over the years. Don't post anything on social media. It's going to result in a fight, or you're going to get in trouble at work, or just something stupid is going to come from it. So just don't even do it. Be like me and just post pictures of your cats and your son. That's the way to do it. Not my story, but my mother's. However, it is my story too, because if it hadn't happened, I wouldn't be here. When my mother was pregnant with me, she was still married to my biological father. They would divorce maybe a couple years after I was born, but at the time of the story, they were still happily married. He was an actor with a local theater group in Pensacola, Florida. She would often accompany him on dress rehearsals, mainly because she'd get stir-crazy and want to get out of the house. She couldn't drive while pregnant, doctor's orders, so she relied on him to take her anywhere and everywhere. Most of the time, she'd sit in the dressing room reading a book, but that got boring very quickly. She then took it upon herself to help out with the dress rehearsals. She would take a notepad and a pen with her and take notes while the actors and orchestra did their rehearsals. She would sit on one side of the theater and take down notes, such as if certain actors' positions on the stage blocked her view, and eventually another audience member's view, and another actor from that side of the theater or some other part of the set, a tree, a house, or a wall, blocked the view of both actors from another side. Maybe the orchestra played too loudly or too softly for you to hear both actors singing and the orchestra providing the music. If it was a musical, she would move from one area of the house to another throughout the rehearsal. On this particular night, after rehearsal was over and the curtain fell on the stage, my mom got up from her seat, which happened to be in the upper balcony. She began to walk down, but being several months pregnant with me, she was unable to see her feet and therefore unable to see the floor below her. She was going down the steps and misstepped, started to fall forward, and that's when it happened. As she fell forward, she felt someone grab her upper arm very tightly and pull her back. She also heard a voice whisper, "Hold on, I've got you." It pulled on her arm, guiding her down the stairs. She grabbed onto the handrail and was able to make it to the landing safely. When she stepped out into the lobby, no one else came out. When my biological dad came up, she asked if he saw anyone else in the seats, and he said he didn't. The building the theater company was located in once served as a hospital. It might have been the ghost of a neonatal nurse or doctor who was helping her down. Makes you wonder. About 16 years ago, I lived in a 100-year-old house. The dog and I were the only ones home. I went down to the basement to do the laundry, and the dog, a lab/shepherd mix, followed along. She was just sniffing around over all the old part of the basement. As I bent down, I was pulling clothes out of the dryer. All of a sudden she runs, full speed, out of there and upstairs. I never heard any noise, but I definitely followed her quickly upstairs. In the several years after that, we could never get her to come down to the basement with us. She was always the type of dog that had to be by your side constantly, but refused to go down in that basement again. I think animals sense things better than humans. Another time, maybe a couple months after that incident, my teenage son and I, along with the dog, were watching TV in the living room. We heard what sounded like an adult booted footsteps coming up the wooden basement steps. I was waiting for the basement door to open. Even with the TV on, we both heard it at the same time. The dog even lifted her head and listened. Nothing happened, but it freaked us out a bit. Residual haunting is what I think it was, but it was creepy. I was around 11 years old and was convinced that the house was haunted because I heard footsteps all the time, but no doors would open. One day I was under my blanket and I heard the footsteps again. I checked to see this little kid with black eyes, short hair, and was about as short as the bed, just staring at me, about 2 feet tall. The kid had black sclera, pale skin, and black hair. His skin was so pale I thought he was staring at me through the wall. Black-eyed kid or ghost? You decide. My wife and I were staying in her dead great-grandmother's house. It was night. I was standing in the living room, looking outside through all these big bay windows that overlooked a lake. I could see in the reflection of the window that my wife was standing behind me, and I said something to her forgettable. She didn't respond to me, so I looked straight at her reflection and said it again. "Hey, babe, blah, blah, blah." She again didn't respond to me, so I turned around, and she wasn't there. I called out to her, and she answered from the upstairs bedroom. My neck hair stood up. My blood felt like it ran cold. I didn't have the guts to turn around and look in the window again to see if it was like a cold reflection or something. I just ran straight to the bedroom and said, "I think I saw a ghost." My wife said, "Yeah, probably my great-grandma. She totally haunts this place." That freaked me out. I still don't believe in ghosts, but I can't explain what that was. See, that's what bugs me, people like that. See stuff and they still don't believe. What gives? I used to work at this radio station in New Mexico that was listed as one of the most haunted places in the state. It was an old house that had been converted into offices. The story goes that the last owner of the house made a living by carving gravestones in the basement, and that he had died while working on one. When the new owners of the building took over and left the stone where it was, that was a mistake. I heard stories from some people who worked there back then. Shadowy figures seen in unaccompanied rooms. Lights going on and off for no apparent reason. Supposedly, all this activity died down when the stone was moved out of there. Well, most of it. When I worked there, the outline of the stone was still there on the basement floor, and as I worked the night shift, I saw some weird stuff. For starters, the door in the basement was in the break room, and in order to get to the vending machine, you had to walk by the door. Most of the time it was no big deal, but on occasion, I would start to walk past, and this terrifying feeling came over me. The hair on the back of my neck stood up, and it was all I could do to run out of there. Then, one night, I went out into the offices and I turned off all the lights. Save electricity and whatnot. I went back into the studio to keep doing my show. A little while later, I walked out and I saw that all the lights were back on. There was nobody else in the building. There was also a couple of times when I watched CD players open and close on their own. Which brings me to the freakiest story, told to me by the overnight guy. He was doing his show, playing the new Bon Jovi song off the album, and the lights flickered for just a moment. He looked down at the display on the CD player that was showing a different track was playing, though the song he had been playing kept going. We pulled out the album and looked for the track that was indicated that it was playing. It was a song called "I'll Sleep When I'm Dead." When I was a kid, a family friend died. A week later, I was staying at my grandma's house for dinner. She asked me to go and grab the chair, and when I turned around, the family friend is there. She told me about how she died, and that I should be careful with my health. She then told me to tell my grandma that she said hi, and that it's okay. I didn't think anything of it at the time, but now that I remember, it makes my skin crawl. I asked my grandma about it a month or two ago, and she says she remembers when it happened. I was at a friend's house where I'm not exactly sure what was going on. Not sure if I was just having various visual or auditory hallucinations or what, but there would constantly be an unexplained noise inside and around the house, and I'd keep seeing movement out of the corner of my eye. I was fully convinced it was nothing, just because I have lots of pets that would roam about, including a cat that would avoid new and unusual guests. That is, until one time I was walking back to their game room, and I thought I saw their German Shepherd walk up the stairs to the upper floor. Just saw a black figure on all fours that was large and looked like it had a tail, so I figured it must be that big fluffy boy. Except when I got over there to try to pet the dog, it wasn't there. Not in the room or even on the stairs. It was a very old dog with a bad leg, and those stairs went on a while, so there would have been no way it could have gotten all the way up to the top of the stairs before I got there. To make matters even weirder, their German Shepherd typically slept outside, and it was about 11 p.m. at the time, long past when it would normally go outside for the night. I always figured paranormal stuff was made up until I visited that house. There was constantly something odd happening there, so I moved to a new house in the area about a year later. After I graduated high school the summer before college, I got into a huge fight with my parents over signing student loan paperwork, and I packed my stuff and moved out. Fortunately, my boyfriend's parents let me stay with them. I grew up in Rhode Island, and lots of houses there are extremely old. My boyfriend's house had been built in the 1700s. It was part of a farm that had a lot of buildings, and it had 6 gravestones in the back. The guy who owned the house before them was a miser and was robbed and murdered in the house. He was left for dead on the kitchen floor, and he wasn't found for days. If you went into the basement, you could see where his blood had soaked into the floorboards above. Everyone in the house had seen something ghost-like at some point. The mom would see a man in a beekeeper suit come up the stairs at night, sit at the foot of her bed, and just stare at her. My boyfriend once saw the figure of a woman digging through the hay in the loft in the barn. When she realized he was watching, she stopped digging and turned around. She had no head. To be honest, I thought they were just teasing me with these stories. I wasn't a big believer, but the stories were weirdly specific and had obviously always stuck with me. The house had 2 parts, the original built in the 1700s part, and an addition they built in the 1980s. I stayed in the addition. It had a living room, 2 bedrooms, and a very small bonus area, which housed an elliptical. I don't know what that is. I lived there about 10 months total. I made myself at home, and I would often work out on the elliptical. So, some sort of exercise equipment, I suppose. One day the mom came home with a very old charcoal drawing she got from her mother's house. It was in a frame with glass over top of it. It was a drawing of a very creepy looking girl. I hated it. She hung it in the elliptical room, and I could just feel the creepy kids burn into the back of my head every time I used the machine. It still gives me shivers. One winter night, my boyfriend's sister had decided to be silly and have a sleepover like little kids in the living room. When I woke up in the morning, I found a flower on my pillow next to my head. It was ripped out of the ground. It still had dirt on the roots, but it was the dead of winter, and there was snow outside. The mom was really into plants, so we looked up the flower in one of her books. It was a forget-me-not. No one could figure out where it came from. Later that day, I went to work out on the elliptical. When I flicked on the light and looked up, I saw it, the picture of the little girl. It was still in the frame behind the glass, but there were 4 claw marks cutting right across her face, tearing the paper. It was ruined. Forget-me-not. My aunt and uncle used to live in a home where the last 4 victims of a rampage killer had been murdered in the 1950s. By chance, the murderer was also executed by the state on my birthday, many years before I was born. Bloodstains could still be seen from the basement looking up at the floorboards. Kind of like that last story. Weird. My cousins would say that during the nighttime they would hear noises of people coming from the kitchen downstairs, or times when things around the house had moved. All of my scary memories from that house were from being outside at dusk. There was a large pine tree I would hide in and watch my family from. During times like this, I would often hear noises and get the suspicion that someone else was with me, doing the same thing. My cousins and I would play hide and seek or tag, and often we would have moments of finding someone based on seeing a figure or movement and noise, only for no one to be there seconds later. This would happen after we had ended the game and grouped back up, so it wasn't a case of one of us being sneaky and messing around. I was never told about any history of the house until I was older and did my own reading years later. My grandmother taught me how to use a swing set when I was 3. She had died a couple days earlier in Maryland, and I was living in Massachusetts back then. I remember going outside and going on the swing set, and she was there too with me. I couldn't figure out how to get momentum to start swinging, so she told me, swing your legs out when you're coming back down. Tuck them in when you're coming back. I remember swinging for a while after that, and she was just sitting there smiling with me. Then I went inside to tell my mom that great-grandma had taught me how to swing. When I went out there, Grandma wasn't there, but I was sure that she had been there. I was around 7 to 9 at the time. Sorry for my lack of memory, I don't remember much. And my cousin came over. She was a perfectly normal person, but she claimed she could see ghosts with her own eyes. As an 8-year-old, I thought she was trying to scare me. She then told me she wasn't lying, and my dog was right next to me at the time. She was a golden retriever, so she was pretty heavy, and she would need a lot of force to move. And she says, cover your eyes and don't look at the dog. I see a ghost on top of it. And I was a little scared, but I didn't believe her, until I saw with my own eyes my dog aggressively be dragged down the hallway and put in the air, flipped on her back, and was repeatedly being scratched. As I was seeing this, I was running to my mom, screaming. And my cousin got the dog, and she ended up having scratches all over her stomach. And I was afraid of my cousin from then on. And whenever she said, don't look, I trusted her. I was at this really old bar in Queens, New York, probably older than the Squirrel's Ale House. It was opened in the 1800s. It's about 4 in the morning, and the bartenders are wrapping up, and everybody had left except for me, the bartender, and 2 of my friends. The bar was officially closed. However, I watched a person walk out a set of doors in the back of the bar, walk along the wall, and walk into another door at the other end of the bar. I said hello to the person, but there was no response. I remember thinking he was dressed really funny. I knew no one else but us were supposed to be there, so I asked the bartender who they could be. She didn't see him, but one of the other people said they did. I told the bartender where they came from, and the bartender said it's impossible because there was only a wall behind that door, and he supposedly walked out of it. Apparently the room behind the door was sealed up after renovations many years ago. At first they thought they were lying, but as we approached the door and opened it so she could show me there was nothing else there but a wall behind it, the lights flickered for about a good whole minute, and during that flickering, 2 doors on an old wooden bookshelf in the bar opened up and the book came flying off the shelf. I also recall that I got very cold at the bar. At this point, everyone is really freaked out, and we rush to close up and leave. There have been plenty of ghost stories about this bar, and I do have a few other freaky experiences that have happened in this bar to me personally. However, this one is by far the most vivid and seen by more than one person. I'm choosing to omit the name of the bar because I don't want to turn it into some crazy ghost hunting spot. It's still my local drive, and I like being able to get a seat at the bar. That being said, there are many patrons who claim to have had paranormal experiences there. It's up to you if you want to trust a bunch of drunks about their stories. I was always skeptical, and even had tried to write off past experiences as weird but coincidence. I am sure if I did some investigating, I could scientifically explain the things that happened, like weird noises, voices, etc. However, after that incident, I am a true believer that the place is haunted. A few years back, I purchased a bankrupt house for me. After purchasing, I decided to paint all the walls and renovate some interior by myself. So my dad and my brother went to Home Depot. I was scraping off old poster glue, and some poster was left on the first floor girls' room. Actually, the person living before left some clothes and toys in that room. I personally cleaned everything from there. We decided to purchase and leave paint there and leave all the work we were going to do the next day. But the story. Yeah, I was doing some minor work and alone in the home. Suddenly, the sound of a crying baby starts from our home. I looked around and I felt like it was coming from the basement. And I was alone. We only had one central light working in the basement. I remember. Although I went down to the last step and checked, there was no one there, but I still heard the sound of a crying baby. I stepped out of the home and was sitting outside the house on the curb. After about 10 or 15 minutes, my dad and brother came up and I told them everything. He said, "We need to look into it." We all got together and went inside the home, but the sound was not coming. I said it was coming from down in the basement, so we all went down in the basement. But at that time, it was completely silent. We stayed for almost an hour and heard no sound, and we headed to our old home where we were living. The next day, we woke up early and needed to start paintwork and decided to do 2 rooms by evening. We started our work, and around noon, that sound had started again. It was literally the sound of a baby crying, and luckily we were all there. My dad said we need to check from where it's coming from. We all went down to the basement and checked it. It was coming from the storeroom door. I was so scared, but my dad not so much. We walked toward the storeroom and looked inside. It was dark. The sound stopped, but still we was looking inside from where it was coming from. There was small panels missing out of the wall on the bottom of the storeroom, about 2 to 3 feet. We checked inside. It was like a small tunnel that was turning after 4 or 5 feet. My father asked my brother to go inside and check to see if there was anything, but he was scared, so he asked me. I went crawling inside, and I decided to go backward after the turn. I turned and I crawled about 2 feet in, and suddenly it started the sound again. I literally crapped myself and then just crawled outside as fast as possible like I was going to die. I came out and was literally shaking, but my dad was there, so that helped. After a few minutes, the sound stopped. My father said that someone's got to go in and check what was in there. He couldn't fit inside, or else he would go. He asked me to go back in again. I went in again, and now took a torch with me. I was on the turn, and I checked the torch, and there was a baby doll, battery powered, in there. Probably later on, we assumed it came down while previous owner's daughter threw it in the air ventilator or wall duct, and it slipped back all the way there. You know, dolls are creepy. Okay, this setup is weird, but it's true. I started college in 2005 and I decided to go to seminary to pursue a degree in church music. I was, as seminaries go, in an all-male dorm. I had 3 other people rooming with me, so it's not incredibly ordinary, but the headstone in the common closet was certainly extraordinary. I don't completely remember the inscription on the headstone, but it was dated to sometime in the late 1800s, and it was pretty crusty. None of us knew why it was there. None of us told anyone. We all kind of accepted its existence and moved on. Kept a vacuum in front of it, but whatever ghost was attached to this particular earthly object either wanted our attention or simply hated silverware. Anytime one of us was alone during the day or night in the living room, we'd hear the silverware rattle in the kitchen drawer. When I got out of the taxi after one night out, I stopped at the top of my street and rolled a cigarette and looked up to see a blonde, mid-20s woman with a white sheet draped over her. She looked right at me and she said, "Do you have the time?" So I tell her. She says, "Oh, okay," and started to walk really slow. I asked, "Are you okay?" She turned her back, and I will never forget her face. Mouth open, thick black mascara running all over her face, and black sunken eyes. This started worrying me. Do I look okay? And he starts walking again. So I called my friend and tell him what had just happened to me. He tells me to go find her and call the police, because it sounds like she had just been attacked. I head down a long straight road, but I didn't see anything. So I started walking back. At this time it's about 3 in the morning, and I'm just about to head down the street when a car pulls up next to me and there was a man driving. I thought I would go over and ask if he saw a girl. I knocked on the window. "Can I help you?" he says. I said, "Yeah. I was just wondering if you would happen to see a girl in a white sheet. She just asked me what time it was, but it looked like something had happened, like she got attacked." The man's jaw dropped. "Are you sure?" he says. After giving him the full story, the man goes on to tell me that his wife had just had the same thing happen to her. But here's the strange part. This happened to his wife about 5 minutes ago, at the other side of the village. This is a 15 to 20 minute walk from where I was. It happened to his wife and me at the same time. I've never seen her since, and a man says that he was going to call the police. But yeah, every time I think about it, it just seems to get stranger. Like she was also barefoot and had really dirty feet. But her eyes, I will never forget. There was no white, just 2 black holes with this thick black running mascara. Well, that's pretty creepy. And with that, we have reached the end of the road. Hope you enjoyed those scary stories. If you did, or if you got a question or story idea, or you want to be a guest on the show, send an email to indarkplacespod@hotmail.com. Thanks for listening. We really appreciate you. Thanks as always, Jimmy Haunted. New episodes of the Haunted Chronicles can be heard the first Friday of every month on Nighthawk Radio. Thanks to all the crew at Nighthawk Radio. We'll see you again right here next week. God bless.